Our guest is Mordecai Lee, professor of governmental affairs at UW-Milwaukee and a former state lawmaker. What's your initial reaction to this?
We could talk about this in terms of the politics of the right wing of contemporary American politics, but I really think we should start at the bedrock of this, which is about secession itself. And I think it's important to say that efforts to secede are an effort to overthrow the Constitution of the United States, and frankly can be called a traitorous activity. Now, I'm not talking about freedom of speech. Anybody can talk about anything. And in fact, when there were court rulings back in the 1940s and 50s about communists in America wanting to overthrow the United States, the court was very lenient about freedom of speech. But I think we need to move into the heart of the issue, and that's that the U.S. Constitution does not permit secession. We fought a horrible civil war over this principle to use the phrase of the resolution coming up, an extreme circumstance, which was the issue of slavery, which is about as extreme as one can get if you want to talk about human beings as property. And it was absolutely clear that there was no right of secession. The only way to proceed towards secession would be to promote a constitutional amendment to the U.S. Constitution that recognizes the right to secede, get it passed by Congress, get it ratified by the state, and then try to do it. But otherwise, there is absolutely no option, and it's totally outside the pale.
And it's traitorous, you say?
I would say that anybody who wants to overthrow the Constitution, anybody who takes actions to promote secession is engaging in a traitorous activity. And I know that sounds strong, and I know we're supposed to, be gentle about everybody having freedom of speech, and I realize that some people don't take this seriously, and they think this is something of a joke about some crackpot, radical right, sort of flat earther concept. But this is very serious. When the U.S. Constitution was ratified and there were the initial threats of secession, going back to when John Marshall was the Chief Justice, way before the Civil War, the Supreme Court enunciated the doctrine that the phrase that began the words of the Constitution, "we the people," and then it goes on, I think it says of the states or of the United States, but he said that was crucial. It was that the people ratified the Constitution, not the states who ratified the Constitution. They only did it sort of on behalf of the people, and that therefore the states don't have the right to withdraw their ratification. It was a one-way decision. When you said that the resolution calls for working on a law that would then permit secession in extreme cases, any law on succession, whether it would be a state law or a federal law, would be by definition unconstitutional. It would be tossed out in court in about 30 seconds because there is no permissibility of secession. So the only way to do it would be to amend the Constitution to create that right, and that's not what this resolution calls for.
Gary in Ripon is with us. Hello, Gary.
Hello. I think the single biggest reason that this is coming up now is that we elected a black person as president, and then when his opponents did everything and spent as much money as is possible to bring him down, we re-elected him. And then this president went and put through some kind of health care bill that means that lazy people will be able to now get health care paid for by hardworking people. The combination of all this together is just too much for some people to accept, and this is how they're expressing it.
And our next caller is Dee in Beloit. Hello, Dee.
Hello. I have to say that this idea, this notion that they're even proposing is absolutely ridiculous. I feel this is a culture that Scott Walker has created, and this Republican Party of Wisconsin has gone so far to the right, and we have these politicians that are coming in with just ridiculous ideas.
Yeah, Joseph on Twitter says, what about trade? We would become a third world country, lots of milk and no oil.
Oh, that's a great observation. But Dee also said the same thing about how would things really work out, and things would not work out very well for us. And I think Joseph is right and Dee is right in the sense of that if you give it even 60 seconds worth of serious thought, even setting aside the constitutional arguments that it cannot be pursued, it's not a viable option.
Let's take another call from Dave in Oshkosh. Hello, Dave.
Hi, thank you for having me. I just wanted to say that I think it's really unfair to dismiss the people who support the idea of secession, whether it's in Wisconsin or any other state, as extremists or on the fringes of a political spectrum. And the idea of it being a treasonous activity or to even bring up or suggest such an idea, the idea of that this is against our Constitution in doing so, I think it only supports us in our Constitution when our federal government has hijacked the Constitution and it's been just completely dismissing it on all fronts and all grounds. This is one of the most patriotic things somebody can do and say, hey, I've had enough.
But I still think it's important to say that anybody who believes in secession from the United States is un-American. You know, the phrase un-American was very commonly used by the House Un-American Activities Committee, mostly against the left, occasionally against the right, occasionally against small fascist groups in the United States. But it seems to me that anybody who wants to overthrow the Constitution it is un-American, because that means they are not pledging allegiance to the U.S. Constitution. They do not believe the government is legitimate, and that's why I've been taking such a hard line, even though I hope it's coming across that I truly respect Dave's right to express it as freedom of speech. If somebody believes that a law is unconstitutional, that it was passed by Congress but it's unconstitutional, for example, Ken referred back to a section of the latest National Defense Authorization Act. Well, you can go to court. You can argue that that law is unconstitutional, and you have every right to do it. But once the court rules that something is, let's say, unconstitutional or something is constitutional, the only way beyond that is to amend the Constitution.